It's May 1st, and you will wonder what is happening. Well, definitely it's Workers' Day, but guess what? Guess who's at work? It's myself and, of course, the delectable Olive Emodi. Benga is out on an assignment, and hopefully he should be able to connect with us in the course of the program. Welcome to Breakfast Central, and this is brand new month, no doubt, May 1st, 2026. We're almost there. It's almost half of the year. And if you haven't gotten your plans all figured out, well, you just might start today, or better still, tomorrow. A lot has happened in the, politics. Talk about the Supreme Court, talk about the political parties, talk about the strike from SANU, NASU, which invariably will affect Nigeria's educational system. But then again, the federal government has its eyes on the situation. We'll tell you every single thing you need to know. We have a beautiful lineup of guests who will be joining us, from senior advocates of Nigeria down to political party members, well, chieftains, and not forgetting to you get to make a comment or two on all socials, letting us know what your thoughts are concerning the stories we'll be bringing to you here on Breakfast Central. That's not all. You also get a chance to comment, or we go straight to the papers on the newspaper front pages. That will be our final hour, which will be the last hour. Well, don't just think I'm the one alone in the studio. I do have Olive Emodi in the studio. How are you?
Oh, I'm well. Happy Workers' Day to all who have work.
And for those who don't have work, what happens to them?
Happy Friday. Honestly.
It's TGIF.
This TGIF. It rings different every time there's a public holiday. Yeah. I'm a tad jealous about those who do not have to go to work, because I just wish, I didn't remember that my job is not like every other person's job, and I have to show up at work. But I'm glad, and I consider this an honor to be able to do this with you every morning. A special shout out to our virtual audience, those joining us via YouTube, where we stream live via News Central TV Live. Thank you for joining us this morning, May 1st. Workers' Day should not just be a holiday. It should be a day that we will take time to reflect on the contribution, the socio-economic and political contribution of workers to our country. The small and medium enterprises, the private institutions, government-led agencies, the sacrifices that workers have to make. In Nigeria, for example, for those of us living in Lagos, being a worker is not the most easy part of life, especially because people live on one end of Lagos and have to work at the other end of Lagos. So it's a day that we must reflect on workers' wages, salary, and to bridge whatever inequality divide there might be in terms of meeting workers' needs. And I hope that today you can just take time, relax, and reflect on your work, be proud of what you do, and that organizations, employers of work, can use today as a day to reflect as well on the contribution of their staff. Reward them. Give them more money. Increase their wages. Yes.
Olive, relax.
I say,
relax.
Please,
relax. We know that's very necessary, but let's hope that people can get solar. In
totally unrelated news, there's a cold going around.
Yeah, by the way, there's this flu in the air.
Something is going on around, and
we don't know where it's coming from. Yesterday I was with a few persons, and they were all coughing.
It's not that they said that COVID is back in town.
We can't spread. We don't know. Someone said that yesterday. Are you sure? I said, no. If it were to be so, we would have gotten a notification as well, especially from the Ministry of Health. But without further ado, thanks for staying with us. Shout out to the guys on YouTube who already dropping their morning
I saw Mr. Johnson. He says, Olive also sent Benga to buy Okpa. Thank you very much for that beautiful comment.
No.
I did send Benga to buy Okpa.
No, not Okpa. We didn't send him to buy Okpa.
Because the day I was on
I know, he said he sent you to buy Okpa.
Yeah.
But for Benga can't buy Okpa now.
So we send him to buy Amala.
We send him to ensure that he washes the cars and all that.
Thank you very much. I love it a lot.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yesterday was quite interesting. Nigeria's courts, political parties, there's so much that has happened. We're going to be bringing you all that, but you can head on to YouTube to start to drop your comments ahead of time. The Supreme Court, Nigeria's apex court, has delivered its rulings on the fierce leadership crisis rocking the African Democratic Congress, ADC, and the People's Democratic Party, PDP. In the case of the ADC, the apex court set aside the Court of Appeal status quo order That is the status quo antebellum that has been causing issues. And this, of course, hampered Senator David Mark's faction. The court described parts of the lower ruling as judicial overreach. It has now restored the Mark-led executive temporarily and sent the substantive suit centering on allegations of forged resignation of the founder, Ralph Nwosu, and the legitimacy of Nafiu Balagombe's claims back to the Federal High Court for full trial on the merits. While on the issue of the PDP, the Supreme Court, in a 3-2 split decision, upheld the nullification of the controversial Ibadan National Convention of November 2025. It condemned disobedience of earlier court orders and effectively invalidated actions taken at that convention. You know, that was the convention that some people refer to as Amala Convention. Is that it? Larry Olayinka.
That's what they called it. That's what they tagged it as, though. So it's a Amala Convention. But the Amala Convention has been nullified. Therefore, Turaki-led faction, nothing to offer. That's what it says. However, in all of that, there was also, Olive, what we've seen so far, I mean, if you permit me to just go in, we've seen a misinterpretation of what happened yesterday. There's so many different interpretations of the Supreme Court's judgment yesterday. First of all, we did see of course, the FCT ministers, SSSA, Leroy Olayinka, celebrating that the Amala Convention has been nullified. However, the Wike faction has been upheld. But it didn't turn out to be so. Now, we also have another one that says that they nullified the Ibadan Convention by Governor of Seyi Makinde, I beg your pardon. They upheld the suspension of Samuel Anyanwu, thereby, in the same weight, also nullifying the Abuja Convention by the FCT minister. Because if you uphold the suspension of Samuel Anyanwu, who, from the Wike's camp, had said that he's the national secretary, and then you also have a chairman, and the court says, no, we would not recognize these people, then it simply means that your convention, which actually introduced these ones into these positions, therefore holds no water as well. But you see, we're seeing PDP factions and so on, but how do we know this? Well, we know this because just yesterday, the law, especially that of the party, states that since there was no leadership at that point in time, no leadership from Turaki-led faction, no leadership from the Wike-led faction, it means that the BOT will take over. And who is in charge of the BOT? Well, just yesterday, they quickly gathered, they had a meeting, and they sat immediately. And I'm talking about Adolphus Wabara. Yesterday, I mean, he said he had taken charge of the party, the Board of Trustees. Now, let me quickly read this. He said, the Board of Trustees of the PDP announced that they have taken over the party's leadership following the Supreme Court's decision. Exactly what you have there on the screen. That one, first of all, is when they acknowledged the Supreme Court's decision, and that's exactly what they said. But as we speak now, Senator Adolphus Wabara, chairman of the PDP Board of Trustees, made the announcement in a statement as soon as it was done. And what it means is they've taken over the party so that the party would have leadership. And they met quickly. And then you also had the governor of Oyo State in that meeting. There are also videos and pictures circulating yesterday. They called it the Emergency Stakeholders Meeting. Board of Trustees take charge to restore party stability. This means that everybody in the PDP will have to sheath their swords, come together, including the Wike-led faction and the Seyi Makinde faction, and ensure that, okay, where can we go forward? But some are also celebrating that means the FCT minister no longer has control over the party, because the BOT, Adolphus Wabara, is part of the Seyi Makinde. Well, we can still highlight it as a faction at this time. So where do we go from here?
I mean, the drama and the confusion, the drama is not only with the PDP. If you come back to the ADC as well, the ADC has its hands full. While on the one hand, the Supreme Court has said that the status quo antebellum was totally unnecessary and has referred them back to the Federal High Court. Many would argue that this did not determine who the actual leader of the ADC is. And there's such a short window. Recall that INEC has a deadline as well for the parties to submit a membership list. That is the 10th of May. So we have 9 days. We've already entered a new month. This is the 1st of May. We have 9 more days for the parties, so they have a narrow window, really. So what they have is not a final solution. It's some sort of a temporary relief that can turn a different way if we're not being careful. So the position regarding, where we are with the ADC is a very sensitive one. There was a lot of jubilation yesterday. We'll share you clips of the ADC supporters yesterday as the court, gave its ruling. There was jubilation and celebration. Let's take a look. Maybe let's listen to the audio and see just how excited they were.
The Supreme Court allowed the appeal of Senator David Mark. Relax. In part, the order made by the Court of Appeal that status quo ante bellum be restored had been set aside. In other words, the basis upon which INEC acted to remove the name of Senator Mark and his ESCO had been removed by the Supreme Court agreeing that the order of status quo ante bellum made by the Court of Appeal was unwarranted, had no basis to make it, it was unnecessary. But affirm that we should go to raise the question of jurisdiction before the trial court. In other words, the Supreme Court allowed the appeal. The objection to the competence of the appeal was dismissed. The appeal was valid, but they agreed that we ought not to have come to the Court of Appeal for the question to come and show cause. And so we're going back to the Court of Appeal.
The trial court.
How do you react to that? How do you feel?
In my view, that's it. The Supreme Court is a court of policy. Like you hear their lordship said, they are all Nigerians. Yes. They are aware of what is going on. Democracy must flourish and it must thrive.
So finally, what's the state of the matter at the Federal High Court? Where are we at the Federal High Court?
When we get there, I'll answer you.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
ADC! Arise, we shine! Arise, we shine! Arise, we shine!
Are we going?
All right, there you have it. That's the celebration of the ADC. But we must remember that, like I did say, it is not yet Uhuru for the ADC. Recall that 2 days ago, there was also a separate Federal High Court ruling that had barred INEC from recognizing ADC state congresses conducted under committees set up by the MARC-led NWC. And MARC had confirmed that the party would appeal the ruling, insisting that ADC would still be on the ballot for every election in 2027. So they need to appeal that because they will need the congresses to be able to conduct their primaries. They have such a short window, 9 days. If they do not appeal that, and have that in their favor, we do not know how that will turn out. Without valid state congresses, party cannot conduct the primaries that would require it to field the candidate for the 2027 election. So all fingers crossed. We're just going to wait and see how things turn out for the ADC. But like I did say, it is a temporary relief, a celebrating moment for the David Mark-led team or the David Mark-led leadership. So just to clarify, it did not state who the original leadership is. What it did say was that status quo ante bellum was not necessary.
Well, I think we also need to look at the chain of how this all started. So let's try and break it down. One, Nafiu Bala Gombe went to the Federal High Court to get a court injunction to stop the David Mark-led ADC from parading themselves as the authentic and official ADC members.
And to stop INEC from recognizing them as such as well.
Exactly. That's one. The ADC did not go to the Federal High Court to challenge that when they were called. They ran quickly to the appeal court to go and appeal. Okay. Now they've gone to appeal the entire thing. Now, while they went to appeal, the appeal court said, wait, what's going on? You know what? Status quo, antebellum. Everybody returned to where it was quiet. INEC now said, okay, status quo, antebellum, it means then there's no leader. Oh yeah, delete everybody's name. David Mark-led ADC said, no, then let's take it to the Supreme Court. Just yesterday, the Supreme Court said, no. There is no need for status quo antebellum, okay? Because after all, there was no case.
There was no, there were no other matters
exactly
brought before the court.
There was nothing. So why giving them status quo antebellum, there's nothing. However, you, David Mark, led ADC, Senator David Mark led ADC, go back to where you were supposed to go to, which is the Federal High Court. And that's why, if you look at it carefully, a lot of analysts are saying that is what the ADC could or should have done immediately, since, rather than rush to the appeal court. And, I mean, they were blamed for that. But the good news is we would have some members of the ADC join us. And I think this is one question that they need to answer, because some verified members of the ADC agree that what was done was in the right direction. But if you ask a few who, tilts towards the ADC now, they feel that, well, maybe they really could have gone to the Federal High Court. And if anything had come out from that, then they would have now proceeded to the appeal court. Maybe they were faster than they thought. But then again, guess what? It's like a merry-go-round. They've gone round in circles. And I think, let's be honest, whether we like it or not, we must give kudos to the Supreme Court for, in a way, instilling at least a measure of trust in the judiciary this morning, right from yesterday. Because remember, in a long conversation we've had on Breakfast Central from the guests, from the callers, from a cross-section of Nigerians, everyone feels that this Supreme Court judgment, are you sure? And we don't blame Nigerians for feeling that way. It's actually a fallback from what happened in 2023 after the general elections, where what many thought was white, they later on heard that it is black. But then again, they'll tell you in the court of law, I mean, you are a lawyer, Olive. They'll tell you that it doesn't always pan out the way you see. The law is a law that you must truly understand. So if you expect to follow the law by just thinking you read the terms and the languages, well, you may be mistaken until you get to the court of law. But that's just the breakdown of the back and forth. Now, let's see. People celebrating now.
We have
they're only celebrating the fact that antebellum has been explained. In other words, every finger is pointing to INEC.
Antebellum has been kicked out. They said it was not necessary. Yeah, exactly. So in some measure, validating what they were saying earlier. But how does that inch the ADC closer towards fielding a candidate for the presidential elections, 2027 presidential elections? The deadline is tight. We'll take your reactions on YouTube, and then we'll head to X to get feedback from there as well. On YouTube, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Annie Chinedu Brown, okay, sorry, Wenger had to be unavoidably absent. Mr. Johnson says, there's an adage that says, if you want to eat with the devil, you must ensure that your spoon is very, very long. ADC are dealing with ABC that is being headed by the master of the game. The question is, has opposition ever won a case in court against the ruling party since May 2023? My question contains all the answers you need. Prince Ajibade says, must everything about our politics end in court? The judges are the ones to tell us who is the chairman of a party and who won elections. This country keeps decaying every single day. Honestly, when we will know that our democracy has matured, of course, I always say here that elections are a litmus test for determining the validity of any democracy or the strength of any democracy. And we need to get to the point where our elections are decided at the polls and not in the court. But because we're talking about it on the show here, how the Senate Committee on Electoral Matters, INEC had budgeted a separate amount for litigation. So it's almost like there's a preparation that they will contest this election. How about we get to the point where we're certain, beyond reasonable doubt, that the election will yield the effect that we want from it? Good morning, Alexandra. Paul Emi says time is short here. Let's also bring you clips from the PDP. You know,
but maybe let's listen to. I would love us to listen to Liboros Oshoma.
Okay.
He was live on
tonight
with Felicity.
Yeah.
Just yesterday night tonight, and he said a whole lot. I would love us to listen to his point on the ADC before we conclude with the PDP.
It's called status quo ante bellum. What led to the matter at the Supreme Court in the first place, unnecessary as it may be, was the fact that a court of appeal, after ruling that the appeal brought by the David Mark-led faction was incompetent, now went ahead to ask parties to maintain status quo ante bellum. And INEC interpreted that status quo ante bellum to mean that the position before the war at all, which means, according to them, that it also gives them the power to derecognize. That means they should revert back to ADC before Urafuwosu left. But the Supreme Court today had said, well, the moment the Court of Appeal heard that the appeal was incompetent, that it became functus officios, and there was no need going further to ask parties to maintain status quo ante bellum. It was like granting an order over a matter that had not been heard. And so the court removed that status quo order that was granted and now asks parties to go back and deal with the issue, the suit at the Federal High Court before Justice Linfu, which ordinarily, I say this and I have said it consistently, ought to have been dealt with before the back-led fashion went to the Court of Appeal. All of this jubilation and celebration today would have been unnecessary. All of the time they had wasted would have been unnecessary. If they had just filed their affidavit, their counter affidavit to show cause at the Court of First Instance and deal with the matter, all of this would have been unnecessary. So why the celebration is the fact that the interpretation that INEC gave to that judgment was to the effect that it asked them to return back to the position before the David Mark-led faction came into the party at all. Yeah. So, but I must say this also. Remember yesterday, the Justice Abdul Malik's Federal High Court gave a judgment also upholding the tenure of the State High Court, the State Executive members of the ADC who were complaining that in violation of their rights, that the David Mark-led faction set up whatever they call an interim Congress committee or interim
Okay, so I mean, Liboros Oshoma has always been a tough talker, especially highlighting one of the many mistakes he feels the ADC had carried out. But let's hope that it would be sped up, and then the Federal High Court will eventually be waiting for the Senator David Mark-led ADC eventually. What they could have done since is what they've been reverted back to do.
But the ADC will argue otherwise. They will tell you that they had their lawyers, they knew what they were doing. Again, even what you see to be fair, when you say, oh, the Supreme Court has redeemed itself, it's perspective.
It's perspective. Yeah, it's
on
perspective.
The person's perspective. So the ADC would argue that they were doing what they knew best to do, regardless of what Liboros Oshoma's position is. But, I mean, let us know your thoughts. Your thoughts matter. We're streaming live, News Central TV live on YouTube. And let's see what you think about this. Neji-san says, good morning. To me, this judgment is like a trap. We should take reactions on X, and then we will head over to our...
But let's see the PDP's statement as well before we go on X, so we can wrap up on X. Okay. The PDP did put out a press release, and they said that they talked about the Supreme Court, but they said it's a dangerous bend. They ended by saying the decision the Supreme Court took is a dangerous bend, therefore nullifying the convention, and then, of course, ensuring that the Turaki-led faction, they did not recognize them as well. One of the lines then, that press release says, furthermore, they held that it is not the duty of the court to fish out matters to execute the case of the respondent because the majority judgment undertook the duty of raising matters suo motu without calling on the parties to address them. This is against the position of the Apex Court, wherein parties must be given the opportunity to address the courts on matters raised suo motu. Oliver, I hope I'm calling your language, all right? But we're going to have a PDP member join us. We'll be discussing all of these and more. Like we said, the Board of Trustees of the PDP have taken over the party right now as we speak, because according to the PDP constitution, they stated yesterday where there's no leader and so on, the BOT. But the FCT minister has a different view as well. Let's watch this.
I will know the subject matter in the matter before the Court of Appeal. What the judge was that the Court of Appeal filed by Ibadan, not even Ayahu, filed by Ibadan, when the court made reference was how could you have filed an appeal when it was said that you had been suspended or expelled. But look at it this way. Assuming do not consider that Samayahu and Jibade were suspended by the other group called Turaki's group, assuming. Our convention has been held, and the convention, look, all these people, assuming some of them, we have brought them back. It's the party. And no party suspended you. Party say we have lifted the suspension. So it is neither here nor there. The same party, if they were suspended, why would the party elect them at the National Convention? Okay, let's say that they were suspended. However, for the party to allow them to contest in the National Convention means that the party have lifted their suspension. So there's nothing to bother yourself. Except if you have lost a matter, you have lost a matter. Don't begin to, like somebody who has finished lunch or dinner. The person was not satisfied with all the meat, all the things like the food. It's only the one that uses his toothpick to pick. Is it the one that will satisfy the person? No. So they're not trying to see what they will do.
Okay, so it seems to be neither here nor there who's in charge of the PDP. There are pictures online showing Governor Seyi Makinde, of course, and like we said, the BOT taking over the PDP. They had a quick meeting yesterday. They called it an emergency meeting. There you have images of some of its members, and they met very quickly to discuss the way forward for the PDP. And like I said, it's led by Adolphus Wabara. You could also see him there in the image. So there's a lot going on. But time will fail us. We have X comments, and we also have our first guest who's in. But let's read some very quickly. JB of Lagos says, celebrating that the Supreme Court said a party can exist in a democracy. We've been wounded so badly that basic rights now feel like victories in a civilian government. This is not freedom. This is survival, he says. That's much more like a stern warning. And Architect Uche Roches, I'm sure you all know him. He put out a tweet yesterday. He said, Nafi Bala has cashed out big time. He played the game to the very end, but at the cost of his future, you won't hear much about him again. He says, Wike has also gambled with his future. The only leverage he had has now been handed over to a level of power he can no longer control or manipulate. Fortunately for him, it's now time for reckoning. And this one, Chibwe says, don't celebrate too early. The High Court is where APC wants to do their magic. Oluje says, see why I can't celebrate? Stay with me. Federal High Court, give judgment. David Mark, take him, go Supreme Court. That's supposed to be the last bus stop. But guess what? Supreme Court passed them back to Federal High Court. Is this really a win? Sounds like football, from defense to attack, back to defense again. I might be wrong because I'm not a lawyer, but from my understanding, why is the ADC celebrating? The Supreme Court only told them to go back to High Court for hearing of the matter. That's what he says. And you're right. Basically, that's what they told them, what they could have done initially. But that's all we're going to take, Olive, as we get set to head into our top stories. Our guest is set and ready. We'll be focusing on some of these big stories, no doubt.
And I'll definitely wrap up with the last comment from Arena Assembly. He says, I believe the ADC deliberately refused to respond to a High Court initially because they felt the High Court might bring judgment days before convention. They went to Supreme Court to make this public. Well, different positions, different arguments. We will still expand this further. We're bringing some party members as well as, some experts in the field to come and share the perspective on what this would mean for the ADC and the PDP. Let's now share with you what our headlines and our top stories are this morning. This morning on Breakfast Central, Supreme Court restores David Mark or discounts the status quo antebellum of that was given earlier to the David Mark-led team. The Supreme Court invalidates PDP's convention, and the national emergency number NEC adopts 112 for quick citizens' response. Women youths gain ground in APC form sales process. We'll bring in the newspaper front pages as well. Join us for all these and more. Welcome back to Breakfast Central. We'll be starting off with the Supreme Court's judgment yesterday. Many would argue that it may have dealt a major blow to the People's Democratic Party, the November 2025 Ibadan National Convention, and upheld the removal of key party figures, including former Secretary Samuel Anyanwu alongside other suspended members. The court held that the convention was conducted in defiance of subsisting court orders, reinforcing earlier judgments that faulted parties' internal processes.
The ruling marks yet another chapter in the PDP's prolonged leadership crisis, with legal battles continuing to expose deep cracks within the opposition party. The decision is also expected to reignite conversations around the influence of the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike within the party, and whether the lingering power tussle between rival blocs is pushing the PDP further into instability ahead of 2027. Now, does this judgment effectively hand one faction the upper hand? Or is the Board of Trustees, as they say, completely in charge of the PDP now, pending when the caretaker committee will be agreed upon? Well, joining us to unpack this, we do have a legal practitioner and a senior advocate of Nigeria, Magaji Ibrahim. Unfortunately, he's not able to connect with us using the video, but of course, we'll be talking to him via telephone. And we also have in our Abuja studio live a former spokesperson of the PDP Presidential Campaign Council, Mr. Umar Sani, also joins us there. Good morning, Mr. Umar Sani, and thank you for being here. All right, and thank you so much, Mr. Magaji, as well, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Okay. I think one of the first questions everyone would ask this morning simply is, who is in charge of the PDP following yesterday's Supreme Court's decision in terms of statement or judgment? Everyone is saying, we're seeing different interpretation online from the Wike's camp. There seems to be a little celebration saying, yes, everything has been nullified, they're in charge. And then we're also seeing the Board of Trustees taking charge and having a quick meeting saying, let's re-strategize since we now have the party right in front of us, in our hands. I'm going to start off with the Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Maybe you want to break this down for us before we come back to the studio to speak with you, sir. So, Mr. Magaji, if you're there, can you share with us who is really in charge of the PDP following the Supreme Court's judgment yesterday?
The Turaki faction to go ahead and conduct their convention at Ibadan. Now, that was actually the judgment that brought about the leadership of Turaki Samuel SAN as the national chairman of the other faction of the PDP. But yesterday, in their wisdom, the Supreme Court set aside that decision of the High Court, saying that, my Lord, had no jurisdiction to entertain that order, had no jurisdiction to have granted that order, because there was already an existing judgment that banned that leadership, that conferred the leadership of the PDP on the caretaker committee. So having set aside the judgment of the court, there is actually now nothing that will hold the leadership of the Turaki faction. Only whether we like it or not, what stands out is clearly technology. In the secretary is Senator L and the other chairman. So there is a clear description of judgment.
To be struggling with your audio. Let's come to our guest in our Abuja studio. So let's get your interpretation of this ruling, what you mean or what you believe this ruling means for the People's Democratic Party in terms of who is at the helm of leadership.
Well, like the BOT has rightly enunciated yesterday, the issues before the Supreme Court were adequately addressed. The Supreme Court held that the Ibadan Convention was held in violation of court orders, 2 court orders, and as such, the convention was accordingly nullified, even though the decision was split. 2 other justices, Justice Haruna Zamani and Justice Abubakar Sadiq Umar, disagreed with the majority judgment and held that the Ibadan Convention was done in compliance with the statutory rules, which is that it is an internal affairs of a political party and is not justiciable. And they gave reasons, citing so many authorities, adumbrated by the Supreme Court themselves. However, without mincing words, the Ibadan Convention has been set aside, which means what the Supreme Court is saying is we should go back and do what the other courts have said. That is, one, to do what was prayed in the trial court, which is that we should do the housekeeping before we now send a letter to INEC informing them that we have complied with the court order, and so we want to do another convention. Again, the second judgment is that we should also include Alhaji Sule Lamido as part of the aspirants for the chairmanship of the party. Nevertheless, I was also in the Supreme Court, and I have followed this case right from the lower court up to the Supreme Court, and I have always been part and parcel of those who were in the court listening to some of the arguments as propounded. In the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal held 2 very important issues. One, that Anyanwu and the rest were suspended by the party, and that they never saw anywhere where they were brought back, any letter or anything saying you are brought back. And once the tenure of the Damagul-led NWC ended, it was Anyanwu who was signing all the documents. He was the one who appointed Abdurrahman, So if the Supreme Court says having that you brought a cross appeal before the Supreme Court, which was, I was there when JB Daudu SAN was insisting on the cross appeal, and in view of the issue, it was a little bit debated, before the final judgment. And the whole 5 justices yesterday dismissed the cross appeal, which means they are still under suspension. And once you are still under suspension, you have no rights whatsoever to do anything. Anything you have done within that period that you are under suspension is null and void. They convoked, they set up a new NWC and put Abdurrahman as the head. They also set up a caretaker committee. The same people and then they also were the ones who convoked the Abuja Convention. So if at initio they say you are under suspension and you cannot do anything within that period, it technically means that you can, all the things you have done within that period is null and void and of no effect. And so bringing the matter to say whether any group was agreed upon by the court is wrong. The court has already clearly stated its position on all the issues, and they have agreed that those people, they have held the position as enunciated by the Court of Appeal, that those people are under suspension and they remain under suspension, and so all their actions are null and void. And so as it is now, the PDP has no leadership. If the Ibadan Convention is set aside, and these people who actually midwifed the coming of the Abuja Convention were also said to be illegal, and they have no authority, no rights to do so, it means that that convention is in itself is also a nullity. And so you come back to what is the stand of the party? The party cannot stay without leadership. And so the BOT, in its own wisdom, headed by Adolphus Wabara, decided that the best thing is to convoke a meeting yesterday, which in that meeting, a decision was reached, and it was read by the secretary of the BOT, the former governor of Niger State, Babangida Aliyu, the chief servant. And that position is that we will hold a BOT meeting. The party will hold a BOT meeting on Sunday and on Monday, since we have already given the statutory notice of 21 days for us to be able to hold our next meeting to INEC. On Monday, we shall also hold a next meeting to determine the course of action. And of course, the course of action is to set up a caretaker committee that will now continue to rule midwife the PDP throughout the elections. And after that, the party workers who have not been in the party secretariat were directed to return back, because being the custodians, the BOT are the custodians and the conscience of our party. And so the building now, since Wike's side are also not part and parcel, the building and everything is now domiciled under the care of the BOT. And so if it is domiciled under the care of the BOT now will direct the affairs pending when the caretaker committee will be set up to run the affairs of the party before another convention is held to elect officers of the party.
All right. Just to follow up, to that, the BOT has cited Section 32 sub 5 of the PDP constitution as the basis for their takeover. Now, just like you said, that there is no leadership in the PDP. Different factions, the Wike-led faction, for example, would not agree to this. The opposition has said that the BOT is overreaching in its decision to, step in and take over. Who validates or how do we see the position of the BOT being some sort of a unifying factor? And are we closer to seeing another physical altercation at Wadata Plaza?
No, the BOT, by the nature of our constitution, is the custodian of the assets of the party. So if the BOT is taking charge of the party, it is not the BOT that will elect the National Working Committee, the caretaker committee. It is the neck of the party, and the neck of the party, the process for the convocation of a neck meeting had already been done. Signatures have been taken. There are two ways you can call a neck meeting. It is either a substantive chairman will call for a neck meeting, or 2/3 of members of NEC will sign convoking a meeting. And 2/3 of our members have already signed, and it has been forwarded to sent to INEC, and the statutory 21-day notice has been given. So what will happen is that NEC will now take that decision. The decision does not rest with BOT. The BOT only temporarily steps in as a sort of buffer before NEC takes a final decision on the matter. So I don't think there will be any fisticuffs or any problem. But I can assure you that we are taking the right course, of action. What the BOT is doing and what the party is doing is on the right course. The wicked faction, nevertheless, I know, will believe that the judgment, since the Ibadan Convention was set aside, and their convention was not an issue before the Supreme Court, that means their convention is accepted. No. Once the people who are the ones who brought in those people who now midwife the convention are said to not be members of the party, then whatever they have done within that period keeps everything they have done away as part of the decisions of the party.
Does this include Senator Mao Habunwa, who is actually stating that he's the chairman of the BOT?
No, Senator Mao Habunwa's BOT was just a concoction. Our BOT has a way of being put together. Our constitution is very clear. There are what we call statutory members. Those are members who have held political positions and who have been given such privilege, like the president, a former president of a party, a former vice president of a party, and of course some select governors of a party, are members of the BOT. Then we have elected members. There are those who must be elected to become members of the BOT, and they represent certain regional blocks, the 6 regional blocks, and they are elected, on the strength of, that region, and they represent that region. And there are other members of the party who are foundation members, like people like Jerry Gana, people like Haja Ina Churuma, and the rest. They are all foundation members. And then we have other members who are, provided some privileges, like some mothers of the party who have been together right from the beginning. They are foundation members, and like Hajia Hawa Musa Kida from Kaduna State, she's a foundation member. And so these are the processes. But in the case of the BOT, as put up by Wiki and Mao as Ohabunwa was, there was no such things. They just sprung up a BOT and then appointed somebody as the BOT chairman, and that appointment came from Anyanwu again. So these are the things we are saying, that it does not hold water.
Okay. Magaji, as Senior Advocate of Nigeria, has joined us. Can you hear us, please? Okay. Since you can hear us, we'd like you to speak on the legality of what happened yesterday. Prior to the Supreme Court's ruling, Nigerians were a bit skeptical. And people are still asking, why is it that these cases must actually be thrashed out, in courts? After all, parties do have their own, guidebook. So yesterday's ruling, what did it show again concerning Nigeria's judiciary? Did it show that, yes, Nigerians can still have complete trust in the judiciary to decide on what parties will actually do and what they cannot do? Mr. Magaji, are you there?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so please, I think we are not here. I think our essence of being here is to actually present the matters as they are, and for us to be able to clarify issues for the use of the public and the general understanding of the public. I understand that the Senator Mao side of the PDP went to the Federal High Court, and their argument was that they are still the leaders of PDP, and that they were clearly challenging their suspension by the PDP. And the judgment of the Federal High Court at that time was, although internal affairs of political parties are non-justiciable, but that there are exceptions. And leveraging on the exceptions, my Lord Justice, Honorable Justice Omotosho, decided that their suspension was not in order and that they remain the caretaker committee of the PDP, and that every decision that has to be done must be duly authenticated by Anyawu, who was held to be the national secretary of the PDP at that time by that judgment. Of course, there was an appeal by the other faction at the Court of Appeal, and incidentally, that appeal was dismissed, and then that led to the appeal before the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court did not only dismiss the appeal, the Supreme Court also went further to say that even the convention that was held in Ibadan was a nullity because there was a subsisting judgment of the court, and then the order made by the Ibadan High Court permitting the convention to hold was also done in excess of jurisdiction and therefore set aside by the Supreme Court. Now, until otherwise, what is clear and what stands out now, because there must not be vacuum in every step, what stands out now is that it is the caretaker committee that is held by Abdurrahman and Senator Ayahu as the secretary that remains the leaders of the political party. That is my stand, because this is a judgment of the court, and we must respect it. It must not always be nice and palatable to us, but we are duty bound to respect judgment of the court. Of course, this does not stop the party from employing some other means to see that they get what they want. And if there is no pronouncement of the Supreme Court or of any court on any other faction, remember, each faction believes that it is the authentic PDP. So until there is a pronouncement, just the way there was pronouncement yesterday, we cannot just actually on our own assume position of the court to say, oh, even if they have done this or they have done that, it's not going to stand, it's null and void. No, the proper thing to do is to go and challenge that their action, if you believe sincerely that that action is not the best way to go or is in contravention of the party's constitution, then the best opportunity and option you have is to go to court and challenge it. If there is pronouncement of court, then we can validly say, oh, it is not done, it is not the correct one, it is a nullity. But we cannot sit in the comfort of our office or anywhere.
Mr. Magaji,
I need to correct Mr. Magaji.
Let's hold on, just for clarity, please. We'll come back to you, Mr. Omar,
yes,
please.
He is misleading the public.
We'll come back to you.
Because he is not aware of the facts of the case. From the way he is speaking, Mao Ahobunwa didn't go to court. There was no Mao Ahobunwa when Justice Omotosho, gave judgment, number one. Number two, the issue before Omotosho was not about whether they were suspended or they were not suspended. Because at that time, the issue of suspension has not even arisen. It was after the judgment of the Omotosho that the party suspended them. And so for him and it was not even Ohabunwa, those who were suspended were the 4 people that were mentioned in the judgment. And so there was no issue about that issue before Justice Omotosho. And when the matter went to the appeal court held that the suspension that was given after the judgment of Omotosho was in order. And so the judgment seemed to have favored them in the Court of Appeal, and then they went on cross appeal at the Supreme Court. And that cross appeal was to restore them back as not suspended members. And all the 5 justices of the court said, no, your appeal is not accepted. So it is not about going back to court. The matter was in court. It was only because it was not enunciated clearly for people to understand. But the certified true copy will be ready on Monday, and Nigerians will see what the Supreme Court has rightly said. I was in court throughout the sessions. I was in court in all these things. Magaji is speaking from the comfort of his home. He has not been in court on these issues. I tell you, that's why he's speaking the way he's speaking. He doesn't even understand what is happening.
Let us say, you've heard Mr. Umar Sadiq's position regarding this matter. How do you respond?
To my brother, I think, when we are discussing in a platform such as this, I think what we have to do is to consider that we are representing the public. We are trying to make sure that the public also understands and respect the sanctity of the court. It is not about being partisan in a political. I am particularly not happy with all these divisions here and there in all the political parties. I have said it in several fora that it's not healthy for a democracy. So what I'm trying to do now as a lawyer is to clarify that if there is a judgment, it must not necessarily mean that the judgment will you are happy with it, but you must say it the way it is. There was a pronouncement at the Supreme Court yesterday that the Ibadan convention that was held has been set aside. Now, if you set aside that convention, what that means is that you have to fall back to the initial position before the convention. What was the initial position before the convention? It was the Abdurrahman and the Senator Anyanwu. I'm not their fan. I am not even happy because I feel very well that PDP should not be placed in the position it is placed at the moment. But now the Supreme Court has said it. Whether or not we are happy with it, that remains the position. And what I am saying, if there is any other position that we do not agree with, there must be a pronouncement on that particular position before we ourselves pronounce it as nullified. So we cannot, because we don't have the power of the judiciary to make pronouncements. It's only the judiciary that can make pronouncements. Rightly or wrongly, that remains the position because that was the judgment. Incidentally, I do not want to even go far into this issue. I was not a person of the process at the Federal High Court. It is not as if you go to check the list of factors that appear in the matter, I was one of them. So it's not, I'm not looking at it from outside. I am an insider in this matter. The judgment of the Federal High Court delivered by the Justice, Honorable Justice Demonstration, was in favor of the Anyawus. Was I happy with it? No. Is that the position? Yes. That is my own. So I am not saying that PDP cannot go back and rectify all the problems that are in there. But what I am trying to go from is to protect the efficacy of justice of court. Because as a lawyer, I am duty bound to respect, because I am the minister in the Department of Justice, I am duty bound to respect judgment of court. Whether or not I'm happy with it. So this is the position I am saying. And if you look at it, I make this same argument even in respect of ADC. Because there cannot be vacuum. When there was this one issue of status quo antebellum, there were different interpretations. Some were saying, even the INEC has taken position, INEC say, will not recognize both sides. But my argument was, no, INEC does not have the power to say will not recognize both sides. What was the hostility before the order was made? Before the order was made, there was a David Mark-led leadership of ADC. And the other side were aggrieved. The Nafi Ibadan side were aggrieved and went to court. And then the Court of Appeal, if their own wisdom fell, we don't have jurisdiction, go back to the Federal High Court and resolve your matter. But for now, parties should maintain status quo antebellum. And until yesterday, when that order was set aside, there were different interpretations. But my position has been that David Mark still remains the head of the ADC because they were influenced before they went to the other side went to court. So if you go to court and they say maintain status quo antebellum, what that simply means is that you remain where you are until the final decision of your matter. In this case, before the appeal at the Court of Appeal that went to the Supreme Court, the judgment of the Federal High Court was that the Technical Committee of PDP led by Abdurrahman and Senator Anyanwu remained the valid leadership of the political party. It might not be a very palatable judgment of the Federal High Court, but that was the grievance that led to the Court of Appeal down to the Supreme Court. So this is the position, and when you invite me to your channel as a legal practitioner and also as a very senior advocate of Nigeria, my position is to make sure to come out of myself. Let me assume the position of a new person to analyze the issue because we are here to educate the general public. We are here to tell the public what the law is and how the law goes about. It is obviously the judgment that's delivered. Judgment, once delivered, rightly or wrongly, then what will deliver, not that it is binding.
Okay, Mr. Magaji, thank you so much. But currently, I think we've left the viewers a bit more confused. So I want to get your comments, please, as brief as possible. In short, maybe like they say, understanding terms. How many BOT do we have currently now in the PDP, Mr. Magaji? We have the one which was being touted yesterday. We also have the ones who met quickly in a quick meeting yesterday, of course, led by Adolphus Wabara. So which one is the one that the court recognizes as a BOT?
Now, sorry,
you any longer, it's not as clear as it was initially. Can you hear us? Okay, let's try this. Let's try.
Can you hear me?
Go on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, so what is there is, I am not the category member of PDP. I am actually not in the position to know how many BOT they have, because we have found ourselves in a very bad situation in Nigeria today, where somebody will just wake up from the news and begin to claim leadership of a political party. This is the first time we're experiencing this in Nigeria, and it is pretty unfortunate that democracy will not be allowed to travel in the manner and we expect. So I'm not in the position to tell how many BOTs are there, but all I know is if there is any BOT that was appointed by the caretaker committee that was their position was affirmed by the judgment of the Federal High Court, then that BOT remains. It might not be the legitimate BOT, but technically speaking, because of the judgment of the court, that remains. But that does not mean that BOT is binding on PDP, because PDP still have the opportunity to go back, gather itself, and try to put the house in order and try to come up with an acceptable leadership, not just the BOT, but even the executive leadership. All these issues, unfortunately, we keep playing out not only in PDP, even in other political parties in Nigeria. We see it all around. It is not a very happy event. It's unfortunate, it's pretty bad, but what do we do? So I believe if there is judgment, whichever side the judgment favors, until that judgment is determined or set aside, that side remains the leader or the lawful leadership of the PDP, whether it be the BOT or the executive or the elected. This is my position on this issue.
Okay, I mean, it seems that we have two different sides of the argument. While you, SAN, have given us your interpretation of what the implication of the Supreme Court's ruling is, Mr. Umar Sadiq believes differently regarding this. So is it time for us to maybe return to the court for an interpretation? Is that what happens, SAN? And to Mr. Umar Sadiq, my question to you would be, you have said that right now there is no leadership of the PDP, Umar Sani. You've said that there is no leadership. The PDP does not have a leadership currently, and BOT has taken charge for now. Do we have enough? Does the PDP have enough window to be able to meet the deadlines for, the INEC requirements and then enable it field a candidate for the 2027 elections? But SAN, I'll start with you very quickly, then come back to Mr. Sani. As quickly as you can, SAN. All right. I do not believe that SAN can hear us. We'll probably come to Mr. Okay, yes. All right, please go ahead. My question was, do we need to go back to court for an interpretation, seeing as we have different arguments or different understanding of what yesterday's judgment meant?
Judgment of yesterday, the judgment of the Supreme Court yesterday to me was very clear. Unless if there are other issues that are not yet known to the public, otherwise the judgment said the Ibadan Convention has been nullified. Even the judge that gave the order for the convention to hold didn't have the jurisdiction to do so because of the pending judgment. What is that judgment? Probably it's unless if there are several other judgments, but the judgment I know is the judgment of the Federal High Court delivered by Honorable Justice Omotosho. And then that was the one that led to the Court of Appeal and then down to the Supreme Court. So once that has been done, what is left? Don't forget, what was before the Federal High Court that was also between substantive leadership and the caretaker committee. Now, when you say there is a caretaker committee, it is up to the party constitution to decipher whether we can go ahead.
Sorry, we have to interrupt you now. The audio is pretty bad. We are already out of time. Let's hear from our guest in Abuja studios. Please, sir, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yes. Number one, I want to say that our duty here is to educate Nigerians on what transpired in court. As an SAN, I expected an SAN to be fully abreast with the matter before speaking. Even on the issue of the ADC that he spoke, he said the nephew Bala faction took the matter to the Court of Appeal, which is not correct. It is the David Marks faction that took the matter before the Court of Appeal, where that issue of antebellum was pronounced, before it now went to the Supreme Court for further interpretation. Now, why I'm saying this is because he is mixing things. Even in the PDP matter, he is mixing the issues. There was no issue before the court on the authenticity or legitimacy of any BOT. That was not there. There was no issue as to the authenticity or legitimacy of the neck of either party before the courts. So bringing those matters now to say the courts have decided on them is patently not correct. Secondly, there was the issue of caretaker committee, as we have said, was before the caretaker committee, there was a committee which they formed to say that they are the legitimate NWC. That NWC, it was the NWC that metamorphosed into caretaker committee and then went to Abuja Convention and metamorphosed into full executive of the party. Now, the issues before the court in the Omotosho case had nothing to do with that. It had the Omotosho only stopped us from conducting the convention in Ibadan, saying we must do some housekeeping. 14 state chapters of the congresses were not done, and so forth and so on, and we should do them. Although we have done them, but we should do them. Now, these were the issues before the court. There was no issue of who is that issue came up in our Ibadan convention. In our Ibadan, we went to Ibadan to seek for an order of mandamus, mandating INEC to now recognize us. And in that judgment by the Federal High Court, it was the Federal High Court went further to now say, okay, they have now recognized a BOT, even when there was no request for such. And that case was discussed yesterday at the Court of Appeal. So that issue had not even gone to the Supreme Court. You know, so for him to now bring all those things and lump them together and begin to argue on things he doesn't know, truly, I believe I have not been partisan. I am bringing out the issues the way they are. I have been in court throughout, and for those who know me, when I come to argue, I don't argue because I belong to the Kabiru Tenimu Traki faction or because I don't like the Iwike faction. No, I argue based on facts available before me within the court. And so, because if you are an SAN and then you are brought here, it is because you are found to be legally, excellent. And so you should be able to give us a perspective that will convince the public, and not to be mixing things, and not even, you are not even very familiar with the subject matter. And then you now come before the national television and begin to pontificate. Having said that, your question you asked is whether
we need you to wrap up, please, very quickly. Do we have two BOTs? That's what we just asked. Do we have two Board of Trustees? or just one?
Yes, we have only one board of trustee, and that board of trustee, everybody knows that the board of trustee, led by Adolphus Wavara, is the authentic board of trustee, and we have only one NEC, and NEC has its own membership. You know, they are former presidents, former NWC members. These are the NEC of our party, and the current ESCO of the party. And whether we have time, sufficient time, to be able to meet deadline. As at yesterday's meeting, they told us we have 5 days within which to submit names of our caretaker committee, names, the registered members of our political party, and the rest. And then, of course, we have time because primaries and submission will end on the 30th of May.
Okay.
So we have time.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking with us. It's been a very insightful conversation. We're still going to continue the conversation, but of course with other guests looking into the Supreme Court's ruling yesterday. Thank you so much, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, and also, of course, Mr. Mar for joining us too. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, let's show you what's coming up next here on Breakfast Central for the second hour. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the Supreme Court, of course, the ruling which saw the restoration of David Mark's name back on the INEC portal. ADC leadership suit also want to look into, and SDP on INEC recognition of Gabam. You stay with us.
The Supreme Court yesterday voided the status quo ante-bellum order on the African Democratic Congress, ADC, effectively restoring Senator David Mark's leadership alongside, well, some would argue about what the interpretation of this might be, but some believe that this restores Senator David Mark's leadership alongside Rauf Aregbesola as National Secretary. Others disagree. INEC had earlier removed them from its portal following a Court of Appeal decision, and many observers have attributed this to mean that David Mark-led executive of the ADC is back in the saddle, at least for now, while the substantive suit returns to the Federal High Court. Now, this is a major twist in the ADC leadership crisis that has been raging for months. David Mark's faction claims legitimacy from a convention it recently conducted, while a faction led by Nafiu Bala Gombe challenged it in court, arguing imposition and violation of party constitution. The Supreme Court's unanimous decision yesterday has sent shockwaves through opposition politics, especially with 2027 in sight. This ruling doesn't finally resolve who owns the ADC or who leads the ADC, as legal experts say. It only removes the legal freeze that allowed INEC to sideline Mark. It's a temporary victory for the Mark Aregbesola team, but the real war is still ahead at the trial court. Now, let's talk about this in detail. We're joined this morning by political commentator John Dunu and ADC member Mazi Dixon Uruebu. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. I'll start with you, Mazi Uruebu, and say maybe congratulations are in order. It would seem that the party you left and the party you're now with both have issues at court, and the Supreme Court, gave rulings on both parties. Now, let's talk about your party now, the ADC. And many would argue that this temporarily restored David Mark's faction, his leadership of the ADC, pending the trial court's decision of this lingering legal battle. There are others who say that this is just something temporary and that the real battle is ahead. But how do you react to this? What is the implication of the Supreme Court ruling, and how do you interpret this for David Mark's leadership?
Good morning and happy Workers' Day to all workers in Nigeria, including you there. Thank you for your service to fatherland. You are appreciated. Happy Workers' Day.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me this morning. Yes, my party, the ADC, and of course, the other party that I was part of, the People's Democratic Party, had their day at the Supreme Court yesterday. And the issues that were raised, because I was there, I'm very familiar with that of the PDP more, because that's where I was until recently when I joined the ADC. But being in the ADC now, I'm also relatively familiar with the state of things. And the judgment yesterday clearly puts the INEC chair in his place. The position he took was not fair on ADC, that is removing the leadership on the portal of INEC. I think the INEC chair exposed himself. I've stated that on other platforms, that he has shown that he's probably under pressure to do the biddings of his paymasters or whatever it may be. Because what we are faced with today in our country is the height of political rascality, as I will always.
Little connectivity issue there. But let's move on to political commentator John Dunu, who also is live with us. John, please tell us, what's your take on the Supreme Court's ruling yesterday? Even though we saw a few members of the ADC celebrating, were they actually celebrating? Okay, let me take John. Okay, Mazi is back. John, sorry, just hang on. Let's go back to Mazi. Mazi, please go ahead and finish your comments.
Yes, so sorry about that. The point is that I was saying that INEC has been put in its place by that judgment, and I am happy that they have restored the names of the leadership of ADC on their portal. Is it a temporary relief? Yes, because there are lots of other cases available. But what is important is that the attempt to use the office that ought to be very neutral to kind of sideline the authentic leadership of the party has been, put aside. Now we can focus on real party administration. And of course, those court cases will now be engaged by the leadership, rightly so, of the party. And I don't like it when we quickly describe, disagreements in a political party. If there are a few people who are said to be recalcitrant, boldly declare the leadership, authentic ones are that, as a faction. There's no faction. What we have are a group of people who have decided to become tools in the hands of the ruling party that are doing everything possible to, undermine the opposition. However, it's important to state that it will be difficult for the president and his group to succeed in the plan to possibly have him coronated as president in 2027. There will be a contest.
Many would agree with you that that's just a
contest. And this,
Mazi,
I'm sorry?
Many will agree with you that that's just your definition. The president never said that he wanted to be coronated. He would argue that.
No. We have heard the president. We have heard the chief of staff to the president. Their statements are in the public domain. Because if not, what are they afraid of? You have 31 governors or 32 in your kitty, and you have a majority of the National Assembly members with you, and all of that. Why are they doing everything possible to frustrate the opposition? It is very clear. I don't know why we keep pretending that we're not aware of the happenings in our polity. We are aware that directly the president's chief of staff exposed it when he said in a function in Kogi State that they should continue with the scattering and the decimation of political parties and all that. So
Mazi,
please, let's not pretend. But it's a relief. What happened at the Supreme Court is a relief, and we'll take it from here and move on.
Okay, I need to mention that we have the National Publicity Secretary of the ADC who has joined us. But right before we go to him, before we go to Mr. Bolaji Abdullahi, we would like to go on a quick break. After the break, John, would like your overview, just an overview of what we saw yesterday and what it means for Nigeria's democracy. After your comment, would like you two gentlemen to please hold on for a few minutes while we get the inside story from the ADC National Publicity Secretary as well. But let's go on a quick break, please. We need to pay the bills. We'll be right back. A former member of the PDP, now ADC, Mazi, joins us this morning. I'm not forgetting too, Mazi Dixon, I need to put that out, Iriegbu. And not forgetting to John Dunu is a political commentator. And then we also have the National Publicity Secretary of the ADC join us. But let's quickly speak with John before we start our conversation to get more inside information on what the ADC is doing. We heard they had met immediately after the Supreme Court's ruling. But to you, John, what do you make of yesterday's, Supreme Court's ruling? Can you give us an overview and what it means, especially for politics?
Morning.
Good morning.
And happy Workers' Day to Nigerians. I would say that politics in Nigeria, democracy in Nigeria is still attempting to find its feet. Because democracy in Nigeria without an opposition is actually not democracy. And that brings us to how the people were called or that are saddled with responsibility of, conducting the elections, how they are appointed, So, well, yesterday's ruling at the Supreme Court shows that democracy in Nigeria will still have hope. We still really have hope, and we'll keeping on and asking that politicians should kindly allow Nigerians, allow the environment, allow the political atmosphere in Nigeria to enjoy a proper democracy. It's not a situation where it would be a do-or-die affair. For crying out loud, these positions that people are asking for, they are asking to be servants. I've never seen a place that, or a client that is that's a servant asking to be employed is making it a do-or-die affair. All right, because if you watch the political atmosphere in Nigeria is currently tensed. I mean, seriously tensed, and for it to be doused. So we all know what can be done for it to be doused. Nigerians are tired of, focusing on what is not. Currently, what is the serious insecurity in Nigeria. And the essence of even going to the politics and vying for positions is to serve Nigerians better. And we are discussing politics, a lot of politicking happening in Nigeria. Meanwhile, the economy is going haywire, and the insecurity is over the roof.
All right.
So,
okay. You really have given us an explanation as to some of the challenges we're dealing with, not just with the ADC, but on a broader scale. But I want to come back now to the ADC. Let's hear from the ADC National Publicity Secretary, Mr. Bolaji Abdullahi. There was victory. Members of your party yesterday were rejoicing when this ruling was delivered by the Supreme Court. There are others who, however, argue that this is temporary, that it's a temporary band-aid and not a permanent solution, as this does not necessarily determine the leadership of the ADC. They're saying that what this ruling was speaking only to setting aside the status quo antebellum that was, the initial status quo antebellum that caused the issues that we have seen so far. So talk to us about your interpretation of this ruling, as well as, how the party is taking it and what this means for the party in general.
Well, thank you very much, and happy Workers' Day. Yes, I've seen attempts since yesterday, some admittedly genuine, but I've also seen attempts to minimize or dismiss the significance of yesterday's Supreme Court ruling. Some even ask, why are they celebrating? Of course, we have reasons to celebrate, because if you recall, the issue is not that we didn't have a case in court. Since July 29, 2025, we've been having cases in court, but we have continued to operate and carry out party functions and do what we should do as party leaders and party administrators. Until April 1, when INEC, under Professor Joash Amupito, took the illegal act of de-recognizing the leadership of ADC under David Mark. And that's put a cog in the wheel of the party leadership. So they created a situation where effectively there was no leadership in the ADC. This certainly could not have been what the court envisaged. So yesterday's ruling by the Supreme Court that effectively restores David Mark leadership is a form of victory. And it deserves to be celebrated because it now means that INEC will have no basis on which it will continue to de-recognize the leadership of David Mark. And I'm delighted to see that promptly they've restored that back on their portal. Now, it now means that they can continue to engage with us. It now means that we can now begin the process for our primaries. It now means that the immediate danger of us being excluded, of not meeting the deadline, is no longer there. So we are not saying that the war is over, but when you are fighting a war and you win a battle, you celebrate the victory of that battle while you guard your loin and prepare for the next battle and the next battle and the next battle. We are very convinced that it's a battle that will continue to fight, and we have demonstrated that we have the capacity to fight because we have the majority of Nigerians on our side, because what we are fighting for is the survival of multi-party democracy in Nigeria.
Yeah, we seem to have lost your audio. The last thing we heard was, fighting for multi-party democracy in Nigeria. We hope that the audio... Yes, please go ahead and land your thought.
Yes, that what we are fighting for is survival of multi-party democracy in Nigeria. And what we have continued to say is that when we arrive at 2027, let Nigerians decide if they are happy with what President Bola Tinubu has done, then by any means, let him convince them, on that basis, let them vote for him. But if they are not happy, they must have alternative. If they don't have alternative, that is not democracy. That is something else. And that's why we are saying that for us, what we are fighting for is not just power, but the very survival of multi-party democracy in Nigeria. So yesterday, what happened at the Supreme Court yesterday was quite significant, in the sense that our party leadership can now move forward. Like Mazi said, we can now resume the proper activities of party administration, the job of mobilizing, the job of convincing Nigerians that we represent a viable alternative. We have so many activities lined up that were put on hold or tentative because of the INEC threw us a curveball, and so we are glad that we had that victory. But the war continues. The Supreme Court said we should go back to the Federal High Court. We are ready for that. But we also know that the Federal High Court is not the final court in the land, and we are told that we are willing to fight our battle to the highest level.
Okay. Yesterday, Senator David Mark, we hear, convened an emergency meeting with members of the ADC after the Supreme Court's ruling. I know we may not have access and a preview into what was said, but can you tell us just a little bit what the ADC may have discussed yesterday? And even though many were making it seem to be an issue for not seeing the likes of Kwankwaso there, Peter Obi and the likes, but what was this meeting all about?
Well, the meeting had been pre-scheduled before the Supreme Court. You will know that there was a meeting a day before the Supreme Court ruling, and everyone agreed to gather again the following evening to review the Supreme Court ruling, regardless of the outcome. So we were actually hoping for the best, and while hoping for the best, we were also preparing for the worst. But when it happened the way it did, and we could get a victory out of that, regardless of what other circumstances are still remaining, we still went ahead with the meeting. And the most important thing is that was to get the lawyers that led the trial, that led our team at the trial in the Supreme Court to brief the leadership on what exactly transpired, or what it meant, and what implications, and what we need to do next going forward. And we got that briefings from the lawyers. But understandably, there are a lot of other things we need to do. So the question I thought to what next and what next and what next. And those are the details I cannot give you here. But it was just housekeeping issues and strategy issues.
All right, I'll bring Mazi Rebu into the conversation as well. There is a short timeline. INEC has a deadline that we're working with, and it feels like not all the political parties, but the two major opposition political parties are running quickly against time. What's the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, and which is more likely to happen with the deadline, with INEC's deadline in mind?
There will be participation of ADC in the contest. That has been shelved aside by the judgment yesterday at the Supreme Court. The PDP, my advocacy now will be that ADC cannot do it alone, PDP cannot do it alone. We are all endangered. We are all exposed to these oppressors' tools, all right? Because everything that we are seeing is oppression. Attempt to subjugate all of us, not just the opposition parties, but all Nigerians. Because if not, the hardship in the land, when you complain, the government of the day finds one thing or the other to even, bash you with or lash you with. The angles that we are looking at is that 2027, we are faced with a situation where we have to save ourselves because there's no plan in place by the government of the day to give Nigeria a direction towards nationhood. There is no such plan. To give Nigeria an economic presentation that would better the lives of the people, there's no plan in place. The insecurity situation in the land, there's no plan. In fact, the president has even, clearly more like trivialized security in our country. If you saw the meeting he had with the leaders from Plateau State the other day, the president's comments were, as a citizen of the country, I was disgusted. So we have to do everything possible to ensure that Tinubu and the APC does not continue the ruining of our country, beyond 2027. And that is why I am advocating for the ADC, where I belong now, and the PDP, where I used to be, to come together. In fact, of course, it was activated with that Ibadan summit, where they concluded that there will be need for them to work for the parties to work together and indeed present a common candidate, a consensus candidate, and that is where we ought to be going now. Not whether we are running against the INEC schedule or whatever. We are already immediately INEC blew the whistle. We started making plans. The only challenge is that INEC became a tool to destabilize the political parties. If not, we don't have any challenge. We don't have any challenge whatsoever. But I'm appealing, and I want to use this opportunity to appeal to the MPS of the ADC to please, sir, let us do everything possible to connect with both ends, the PDP end and the ADC end. That is the only way we can, possibly succeed in sacking the APC in 2027. The other activities that we should be getting ourselves involved in to ensure that those who want to contest on our platform and all of that get involved, we should, ensure that we do everything possible to expedite things. But most importantly, I think it is time we know where we're headed. One of the challenges that I think we have, or why the Nigerian people have not clearly embraced everything about what we're doing as a political party, is our inability to, at least at this time, to identify a possible candidate for this contest. We cannot go into this contest divided. And my appeal would be that we adopt a consensus approach, not the primaries that will divide us along the way. I think it is time that all of us get together for the common good of all of us, for the common good of the nation.
If Mr. Abdullahi, agrees with this position that you have held, What do you think?
Yeah, that's why I'm appealing. That's why I'm appealing. You know, I'm a new entrant to the party. The best I can do now is, having been on the other side and being on this side now, the best I can do is, and because I mean well, both for my nation and for the party that I belong to, we have to win this election. We're not just going to go into a contest. We just have to win this election. Okay. If not, I don't know whether Nigeria will survive after 2027.
So let's hear Mr. Abdullahi's response.
Yes, Mazi, I agree with you essentially, and that is the essence of the Ibadan Declaration. The Ibadan Declaration was anchored on the same conviction that all the opposition parties have to work together, have to come together to produce a single candidate to defeat the President Bola Tinubu and the APC in 2027. Because, like you have rightly outlined, it is very clear that our country today is faced with existential challenge at many levels. You know, so we can't even begin to enumerate it. Now, what one will expect is that, okay, this government has learned one or two things in the last couple of years, and therefore they are going to course correct going forward. But from what they say, from their attitude, you can see that they are not willing, they don't have the humility to admit that they made some fundamental mistakes and they have to change course. So if we allow them to continue, only God knows what will happen. You know, when you hear the president of the country thinking that the issue of insecurity is about him, it's an attack on him, it's about stopping him from continuing in office, then you weep for the families of those who have lost children, who have lost wives, who have lost husbands because of this. It means that the president doesn't even understand the enormity of the crisis that we face and how much he has let the country down. So for us, it's not, like you rightly said, it's not about ego, it's not about that. All of our potential presidential aspirants understand this very clearly, that what is at stake is much bigger than any individual. It is the very survival of our country as we do it. And that is why I agree with you.
Okay, Honorable Abdullahi, I guess the network is pretty much playing a little trick on us. Well, we're almost out of time with this conversation, but one of the questions I wanted to ask Honorable Abdullahi simply is how he feels right now, seeing that, how do you feel right now, seeing that the name of Senator David Mark has been put back on the portal of INEC? Just a few weeks ago, Honorable Abdullahi, you were here with us live in the studio, and you did mention that INEC had no right to have interpreted the status quo antebellum to mean removing the names of Senator David Mark-led ADC. How does it feel now, knowing that these names have been put back? And is it yet Uhuru for the ADC ahead of 2027? That will be my final question to you, Honorable Abdullahi.
We are happy that this happened, but we are not grateful to INEC. You can't come and rob me. Then after you have been caught, then you come back and return it, and you say, oh, I have returned what I stole from you. It doesn't work that way. It's either Abukito was incompetent, or he was mischievous, or he was conniving. He could not be. So if he said he removed it in error, as the Supreme Court has proven now, that means he's incompetent. As a professor of law, as a senior advocate of Nigeria, in which he was incompetent and he does not deserve to be the chairman of INEC. And that's why we are reiterating his removal. If it was not about competence, it means that he has colluded with the enemies of democracy in Nigeria. And it is the same conclusion that he no longer fit to sit at the head of the electoral umpire. And we are seeking redress because now it has cost us several weeks of hard work. What they have done by derecognizing, by taking that illegitimate action, has thrown serious cog in the wheel of our progress as leadership of the ADC. And that is why this will give us greater ground to demand for the adjustment of the deadlines in the electoral guidelines. Because you cannot hold a party down while another party continue to raise their head. Then after you have almost reached the finish line, you now release the other party and say, okay, please, now you can conclude the race. It doesn't work that way. It is unfair, it is criminal, and it is unequitable. And that is why we are demanding that INEC must adjust the deadlines and allow us to make up for the time we have lost, courtesy of the INEC illegality. That's what we are saying.
So does that mean that ADC is looking to take INEC to court?
We are considering that because it is obvious that what they did was criminal and it was wrong. Because the Court of Appeal did not say the registered date been marked. What INEC did was giving Nafi Bala what the court did not give him. One of the things that Nafi Bala was asking for is the derecognition of David Mark leadership. And INEC gave him that. The court did not give him that. INEC gave him that. And that was criminal. And Amukuta will remain a criminal in our eye until he tenders an unreserved apology and does the right thing.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Let's get I don't know how this will play out eventually. You say that you may take INEC to court. Mazirewu, let's get your thoughts on this. Mr. Abdullahi has said there's a possibility, it's a consideration that is being looked at, taking INEC to court. Some would argue that it may have been a misunderstanding, and INEC may, in their own mind, have misrepresented or misunderstood the court's judgment, as opposed to
that means they were incompetent. That means they were incompetent. That means they were admitting that they were incompetent.
A professor of law, a senior advocate of Nigeria. Oh my God!
A senior advocate of Nigeria.
In fact, this is an indictment that you have just placed on the chairman of INEC, because if he could interpret the judgment the way he did, and of course the Supreme Court has now put him in his place, first thing he should commence right now. In fact, after that restoration, the next thing I expected is a letter signed by the chairman of INEC apologizing to ADC for that illegal act or action that they took. I agree completely with the National Publicity Secretary of the ADC. He is my leader, and everything he has stated clearly, I agree completely. And the part of suing INEC, I think that should be activated and not just being considered, because we are fighting with a group of people who are deliberately intending to ensure that they undermine democracy in Nigeria. And we shouldn't allow that. So let us make sure that that step is taken. And the call for extension of the schedule of INEC, I also support it, because like he rightly said, you can't hold back a participant in the race. You understand? You slow the participant down, and then along the line, after maybe almost at the finishing line, you now release him and say, oh, no, go ahead with the race. And then you say that is fair. That's not fair. So there is a need to adjust the schedule of INEC to capture the common interest of all Nigerians. And I also accept the submission that this man, so-called, who is the INEC chair, does not have the moral standing to conduct the 2027 election. And I think he should, if he's an honorable man, if he still has anything left in his name to protect, I think he should honorably resign from this position that he occupies currently. That will give at least some sense of fair play for everyone who wants to be part of the process for 2027. But whatever they do, be rest assured that APC would definitely see the exit door come 2027, because Nigerians will go against them. They have done everything possible to undermine our nation, and this cannot be sustained any further.
Thank you.
ADC will mobilize the Nigerian people so that the contest in 2027 will be the Nigerian people against the ruling class, the oppressors of this nation. And that is why I'm agitated about the state of our not up till now identifying with the winning candidate. That is my own focus, really, personally, as a participant in all of this. I want to see that candidate that we will adopt as the winning candidate, because he is there in the ADC. ADC has the best candidate that will win this election for the Nigerian people in 2027. But it's left for us to ensure that we do the right thing, to put on the table our common interests and not individual aspirations and ego and all of that. That is my view since then.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Honorable Bolaji Abdullahi, and also thank you so much, Mazi, for speaking with us. Thank you.
We wish your party all the best.
Thank you, and happy Workers' Day to all workers in Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Happy Workers' Day to you as well.
Thank you. All right. So it's been a very interesting conversation so far, so good. We've taken a look at the legal aspect of what happened yesterday from the Supreme Court, and not forgetting to having members of the political parties involved, especially from the PDP, and not forgetting the ADC as well. But we'll also tell you that if you were asked, what is the helpline for Nigeria? Is a helpline 112-221-100-114. This conversation has been...
I had always known that.
Has always been there.
I had called 112 on several occasions.
And it worked.
Yes, it worked. However, I would say that our emergency help, we can actually try to dial it while on air. Our emergency help line attendants do need some form of training. I would say this because one day we were driving past the Third Mainland Bridge. There was a dead body on the Third Mainland Bridge. And so I called 112 to let them know that there was a dead body they needed to come and pick up. And first of all, there was a lot of noise in the background. It felt like I was calling someone at about 5:30 to 6 in the morning. It felt like I was calling somebody in the market.
The person took the phone home. She was trying to navigate back. He or she was trying to navigate back.
I don't know, but it just felt so... The chatter felt very unnecessary and felt very not personal. But yes, I have called 112 on a few occasions and they have responded. Maybe you want to try calling them now and see, but let's not risk that yet.
Okay,
so
I think I'll try that on my phone now.
Somebody who genuinely needs emergency
112. No, we're just testing it. It's been approved, by the way. It's been approved. It's now going to be the official number in Nigeria for emergencies and so on. Yes.
Well, it has always been the official number. I just think that NEC is adopting it as well as their, official number, as their official emergency contact.
Should I dial the number?
Okay, quickly. Let's see if it works.
Should I dial the number? Let's find out if it works. I hope it rings. Okay, it's ringing, by the way.
Okay. Well, that's the national.
All right. Good morning. My name is Joe. We're calling you live on TV. We just got the information that this number has been adopted by NEC. We just wanted to test if it's working for the benefit of the audience. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And there you have it officially. If you have any emergency around the country, dial 112. That is the official national emergency number, and help will come to you. Do we move on to our newspaper headlines?
Let's go straight to the front. No, before the front. Let's breakfast headlines after the break. Yeah.
Breakfast headlines.
Thanks for staying with us here on Breakfast Central. Let's take a look at the top stories making the headlines this morning. We'll start off first with judiciary matters, as the Supreme Court has set aside the ruling of the Court of Appeal, which ordered parties to maintain the status quo ante bellum in the leadership dispute within the African Democratic Congress. The appellate court's decision, which led to the removal of the David Mark-led leadership from the website of the Independent National Electoral Commission, was nullified on the grounds that it was unwarranted and unnecessary. The Apex Court held that the order amounted to an injunction on the matter still pending before the trial court, where no final determination has been made. With the appellate court's ruling now set aside, parties are expected to return to the trial court to fully litigate the substantive issues and resolve the leadership dispute.
The Supreme Court is a court of policy, and like you hear their lordship said, they are all Nigerians. Yes. They are aware of what is going on. Democracy must flourish, and it must thrive.
The objective of this appeal was to get the Supreme Court to decide the issue of whether or not the claim before the Federal High Court was justiciable. Was it a justiciable claim or was it not? Supreme Court said the Court of Appeal properly declined to hear it because that issue is properly before the Federal High Court. We are going back to the Federal High Court.
We have remained confident in the judiciary. We have repeatedly maintained that we are confident in the judiciary, and we are very proud as Nigerian citizens today that the Supreme Court has not let the judiciary down, has not let Nigeria down, and as Nigerians we are very proud. And this means to us that democracy will survive in Nigeria. Then we can go back and begin to do the hard work of politics.
Also, the Supreme Court of Nigeria has dismissed the appeal filed by the Kabiru Turaki-led faction of the People's Democratic Party. In a majority judgment delivered on Thursday, Justice Stephen held that the party's national convention held in Ibadan, Oyo State, on November 15 and 16, 2025, was conducted in defiance of a valid subsisting judgment of the Federal High Court delivered by Justice James Omotosho. The Apex Court faulted the Turaki-led group for approaching a court of coordinate jurisdiction to obtain a fresh order instead of filing an appeal against the earlier ruling.
The party has moved on for a long time. You can see we are already preparing for our primaries. People are purchasing their forms. By end of the May, we should conclude all the primaries, and we are going to participate. So we are now asking those who are doubting Thomases that PDP is back and alive, very strong and healthy.
This is a temporary setback. PDP will remain irrepressible. PDP will remain indomitable. We will rise again and we will come back to participate in all the elections, including the presidential election. Thank you very much.
Still on political matters, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has appointed Bianca Odumegwu Ojukwu as Minister of Foreign Affairs, elevating her from Minister of State. The move follows the resignation of Yusuf Tuga to pursue a governorship bid. The presidency also nominated Shola Enikene Olaye as Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, pending Senate confirmation. Odumegwu Ojukwu previously served as Nigeria's ambassador to Spain and Italy before joining the cabinet in 2023. Well, there are also more appointments, especially from the Ministry of Power, the latest, which actually took place just yesterday evening. But let's move away from that. The House of Representatives has passed for a second reading a bill for an act to establish a 50-year national economic plan for the country. At a plenary session presided over by the Deputy Speaker, Benjamin Kalu, the sponsor of the bill, Amobi Oga, lamented the poor attitude to development plans over the years, noting that proposed legislation provides a legal framework for the sustained implementation of the nation's development plans. Nigeria's economy has been characterized by a succession of development plans, many of which they say were ambitious in conception but weak in implementation. Let's move on now to education matters. The Joint Action Committee of Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Associated Institutions and Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities has announced an indefinite strike across federal universities and inter-university centers effective today, May 1st, 2026. The directive follows unresolved negotiations with the federal government. The unions formally notified the Minister of Education, Tunji Alausa, citing delays in renegotiation talks and absence of a revised offer on allowances. They said earlier discussions failed to address key demands. Leaders stated that the withdrawal of a circular on allowance adjustments did not resolve underlying issues. And outside Nigeria for a quick run, a Ugandan-American man has been sentenced to death for the killing of 4 young children at a kindergarten in Uganda's capital, Kampala. The convict, identified as Christopher Okelo Onyom, was arrested on April the 2nd while allegedly trying to escape from the daycare center where the incident occurred. Court documents show that the victims were between 15 months and 2.5 years old. Prosecutors told the court that Onyom initially confessed to the killings, claiming he believed a human sacrifice would make him wealthy, though he later pleaded not guilty during trial. The court, however, rejected an insanity defense, ruling that the accurate and precise manner of the attacks showed the act was deliberate and pre-planned.
above, it is the finding of this court, and in agreement with the joint opinion of the assessors, that the prosecution has proved beyond reasonable doubt that the accused person caused the death of the 4 children. The accused person was very sane on 2nd April 2026 when he gruesomely slaughtered 4 innocent souls.
Essanyu lyempulira lya nsuso nnyo era n'omulamuzi asaana kuweebwa nte oba bw'aba ng'anywamu n'akime ekipa ya champagne.
Okay, mpulira bulungi naye ate ninamu okutya. Judicial system ye Uganda abalamuzi bo bantu basoma nnyo, basoma n'embeera z'abantu. Ku pressure baddewo mu bantu ndowooza muli nakyo siyinza kibuusa amaaso nti bagadde sanyusa ki bantu.
Ugandans there saying the judgment deserves a bottle of champagne. Anyway, a final story has it that the United Nations Security Council has extended the peacekeeping mission in South Sudan for another 1 year, while at the same time approving a reduction in the size of the force. The resolution passed on Thursday with 13 votes in favor and 2 abstentions from Russia and China will keep the United Nations mission in South Sudan, known as UNMISS, in the country until April 30, 2027. However, the mission's troop ceiling has now been reduced from 17,000 soldiers to a maximum of 12,500, alongside about 2,100 police officers. The mission was originally deployed in 2011, following South Sudan's independence to support peace and stability in the young nation. And that's all we have for you here on Breakfast Headlines. Don't forget to stay with us at 12. You're going to have a more robust news bulletin with Blessings Mosugu on the 12 report. The front pages of the newspapers is up next. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. It's time for us to go through the front pages of the papers, not just to analyze them and share with you what's on the news, but also to hear from you as we open our phone lines to get your thoughts, as well as head to YouTube to take comments from the chat box. Remember, we're streaming live. We are News Central TV live on YouTube, but we want to hear from you. So if you want to react, comment, oppose, your comments are welcome. The numbers to call on your TV screen. Now, joining us to look at the front pages this morning is analyst Oluwaseyi Akinde. Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't forget, he's also a member of the ADC.
Yes,
Very
so
strong
congratulations,
member.
first of all.
Yes.
To you.
It is congratulations to all of us Nigerians.
Because all of us
why did you say all of us?
We are not in the ADC now.
That's all, it's like the tortoise story. What's your name? My name is all of us.
I remember that story.
So, congratulations to members of the ADC.
Okay.
And I say congratulations to Nigerians. Why I said Nigerians is because if you go on the streets of this country, you see the tiredness, the willingness of Nigerians to have alternative, to have a viral democracy where people can choose. And I think this judgment actually gives us that opportunity and that hope for participation.
But they've said it's not yet Uhuru, because what the Supreme Court has done is what your party, the ADC, originally should have done by approaching the Federal High Court, rather than approaching the Appeal Court, especially when the embattled Bala Gombe had taken your party to court. But now again, they've said it's not yet over because the Federal High Court is waiting.
Yes, we are very confident that we will secure victory even at the Federal High Court. Why? Because what is most important right now is that the party must have leadership. And that leadership matters going into the election. Because don't forget, there are processes which the party must take part of, supervised by INEC. But INEC jumped the gun, wanting to be the destroyer of a fragile democracy. But we're happy that the Nigerian judiciary is reading the mood of this country. And the focus of the entire world is also actually on Nigerian democracy. And for some reason, we are hoping that this country's democracy will be saved. And the 2027 election will be credible. So that for once, let us have leaders that are voted by the people so that they can fix this country. There's no, like I said the last time, there's no place for us to go. 240 million people. Which country in Africa is going to accommodate us? Everybody is telling Nigerians to go home and fix your country. And we must fix this country. And the only way to fix the country is to start by having an election that is acceptable. Having a president, having a governor that everybody can say, truly this person won the election. Because winning an election is not just by you being declared by INEC. It's about acceptance of the people. That is how you can get things done. If you have a government whereby people are saying he did not win election, that way you don't have participation. And democracy is about participation of the people. If you have a policy that the people feel everything is shredded in lies, and you won't get results. So we feel that if Nigeria is able to have a democracy whereby every party participates, and it's not a winner take it all. If you listen to our conversation in the ADC, we're talking about a collegiate arrangement, such that whoever emerged as the presidential candidate of the party is not just going to throw others away. You can share power. It was about ideas. Government is not just one person. So we're looking at an arrangement whereby everybody comes together who have ideas to fix this country for the betterment of the Nigerian people, not just politicians. So, and I feel if we're able to get this right, for once, Africa's giant can reclaim his glory. Because we need to do that.
Before we get into the front pages of the paper, I still want to follow up with what you said. You're talking about everybody coming together. We had Mazi Uregu join us as well, saying that now is a good time for the ADC and the PDP to work together to ensure that they, make good success at the 2027 polls. If we are talking about unifying and forming a formidable force, will that include trying to reconciling the warring parties within the ADC, for example?
Absolutely.
We have the Nafi Bala Gombe, those who are alleging Ralph Nwosu, all the people who, to maybe, Kachiku, all the parties that seem to be displeased. Is there a possibility that everyone will come to the negotiation table?
Yes, there is a possibility for it. You see, everybody is a victim. You don't share power when you don't even have the power yet. So there's no need for being opposition within opposition. And if you look at what we've done in the last Congress of the party, is to make sure that the foundational members of the ADC itself, before everybody joined, where, like in Lagos, you could see the chairman being returned, right? You could see George Ashuru being returned. Why was that done? That was done because, you see, when you come into a new party like this, there are people who have been there, who feel let us bring everybody together. Let us have an inclusive arrangement. So there is an opportunity for that reconciliation.
All right.
I feel the party must even have set that up after the Congress to reconcile warring parties. Everybody come together so that we can rescue Nigeria. And I feel what we currently have in the ADC, the kind of people who manage the party has the capacity. They have a direct connection with the Nigerian people, and they know the mood of the nation. So there is no room for rancor. And that's the reason why the party's arm is open, to make sure that everybody comes together, reconcile everybody to Dumebis and many of them, even Bala himself.
Does that look like somebody that will come back?
If he comes back, he can, people make mistakes. Apologize to Nigerians. Go on the media and apologize to Nigeria and come back to your party.
What you're saying is hypothetical. Do you see a possibility of that remotely happening?
Well,
but he's legal. His legal said they are taking you guys back to the cleaners.
His legal abandoned the case. They were not in court the last time. You see, it's very clear. You see, history, history will pay us back. Will remember the role that everybody played when your nation is facing this kind of. And my advice to him is that as a young person, because he's also a young person, he has the opportunity to correct his name in history, so that his children, when they mention his name anywhere, they can say, oh, I played a role. I made a mistake, but I corrected myself. So that's the opportunity.
Let's get into the front page of the papers this morning. Let's begin with this Nigerian newspaper on the front page of This Nigeria. You acted unlawfully. Supreme Court voids PDP Ibadan convention. Mark back as ADC chair. Factionalization over in PDP, says Wike. ADC camps ordered to return to High Court. Opposition mounts as stakeholders ask Senate to drop new Revenue Institute bill. Tinubu nominates Tegbe as power minister. SANU, NASU begins strike today on Workers' Day. Set up monitoring team to ensure compliance. Federal government withdraws 30% salary increase offer. UBA seeks stronger bank fintech ties for Africa. Let's run through all the front pages of all the papers that we have. Let's quickly go to The Guardian as well. On the front page of The Guardian, we have there clarity, uncertainty as Supreme Court reshapes opposition ahead of 2027. SANU, NASU embark on indefinite strike today. Boko Haram threatens to execute 416 captives. Back to this matter. Worsening cost of living crisis overshadows May Day despite wage increase. Niger local government record 2 polio cases as Katsina decries gaps in vaccination. Federal government resolves MM2 concession dispute, approves aircraft leasing firm. Federal government begins 18-month database modernization ahead of census. INEC affirms exclusive rights to declare poll results as CSO deploys tracker. FEC approves $2.9 billion real projects for Lagos, Kano, Kaduna. Respect Electoral Act, shift primaries to September, Hashim tells Tinubu and INEC. And now to our third paper, the Nigerian Tribune. On the front page, Supreme Court nullifies PDP Ibadan Convention, voids status quo antebellum order on ADC, returns leadership dispute for trial at High Court. Wabara-led BOT says it has assumed leadership of the PDP. Supreme Court confirms PDP's unity, ends factional crisis, says Wike. We also have here, UBA pushes deeper bank fintech collaboration of Pan-African Conference, or at Pan-African Conference. OPA expands access to 1.2 billion naira 10-year scholarship program. Rethink labor welfare strategy. CPPE urges government. Women mega rally signal movement for participation to power, according to minister. Why ADC, Accord, ZLP, AA, APP should be deregistered, AGF tells court. NNPC completes $700 million OB3 gas pipelines River Niger crossing, designed to transport up to 2 billion standard cubic feet of gas per day. Ambode backs Hamzat as Lagos APC candidates. Jandor withdraws from race. Interesting updates there. Bridge linking Kwara Oyo collapses. Wow. Tinubu nominates Tegbe as Minister of Power, appoints Lanre Babalola as Special Advisor on Power. And you can see the picture there. Ekiti Walker stage thank you walk for Oyebanji's second term. I shall respond to detractors on June 20, he says. These are the stories on the front page. You can send your responses, your comments on YouTube where we're streaming live via News Central TV Live. You can also call to react, comment on any of these stories on the front pages. The numbers to call are the numbers on your TV screen. Let's start with what's happening on the political scene. We've talked about your party, the ADC. Let's talk about the PDP because the ADC was not the only one that got a ruling. Yesterday, the PDP also did get a ruling. There have been different interpretations of the PDP's ruling. The Wike's camp believes that it still maintains their leadership, retains them as leadership. But BOT has stepped in. Earlier today, we had Mr. Omar Sadiq and we had SCN, Leonard SCN Magaji join us as well. And Umar Sadiq believes that there is no leadership in the PDP at the moment as a result of the court's ruling. But let's get your thoughts on the PDP saga.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the judgment yesterday also, I think the court or the judiciary is trying to help straighten up the race ahead of 2027. For the PDP, I think they have an opportunity to also for their leaders to step in, especially the BOT, if it exists. You know, I feel that the problem that party has had is because when leadership is meant to step up to bring in disciplinary measures, they were handling it with kid gloves. And that was what led them to where they are today as a party. Now that the court has actually, nullified the Ibadan Convention, Those who have also, they have an opportunity actually to see how they can rescue their own party. They now all still need to go inside and rearrange, sit down together, and maybe some way, they can reach a conclusion. But what is bigger, the bigger assignment ahead in 2027 is that the opposition must produce a joint front. If they are serious about rescuing
do you mind the PDP joining the ADC? I mean, I know there are talks already.
Yeah.
I know there are talks already.
I mean, why not?
Okay, let's take this call from PH, Port Harcourt. Hello, good morning. Hello? Can you hear us? Good morning. Okay, while we're trying
Mohammed,
to stop
are you
that
there?
Hello, Mohammed. Okay, all right, yeah.
Yes, so, I mean, they have
We've
an
seen the
opportunity
Turaki-led
to-
faction at the summit in Ibadan,
Absolutely.
where he made that statement, the pronouncement, what you now term as the Ibadan pronouncement.
Absolutely. I mean, and Ibadan plays a very significant role in the politics of Nigeria. It has always shaped, if you check from the First Republic to the Second Republic and everything. For me, I think the PDP they have an opportunity to work with the ADC, right? It's just the fact the Wike group within the party that has been on the side of the APC. But like I said, there are leadership within that party that must now step forward to create the direction for that party. Just like we've seen the ADC have its own leadership who have stepped forward. But for them, they have an opportunity to actually refix their party. They have an opportunity to do that and join us in the race to rescue Nigeria. Because certainly, the Tinubu government should not come back. This government has failed this country. And every opposition should come together to prove, right, that Nigeria have leaders who can fix the problem.
Well, okay. Let's look at another major issue because...
All right, I believe that Mohammed is back from Port Harcourt. Good morning, Mohammed. Happy Workers' Day. Welcome back. All right, thanks for calling. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Go on.
Yes, I'm calling from Port Harcourt. I want to tell the judiciary,
His network is choppy.
Mohammed, if you can call us back, please do, so we can hear your thoughts as well, please. Let's go back to The Guardian. I want us to look at The Guardian. The Guardian, the worsening cost of living crisis overshadows May Day despite wage increase. The last time members of other political parties were here, they did mention how the economy is becoming quite unstable. Even the TUC and the NLC have said, listen, they need to review the minimum wage because it's no longer what it is in comparison to what the current Naira to dollar valuation is. But, okay, let's take another caller. We'll come back to that question concerning that story on The Guardian. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
All right, Uche, go ahead, please.
Yeah, this issue of opposition coming together, are they still seeing weaker faction as opposition or working for the ruling party? So, personally, weaker faction is not an opposition. They are the ruling party. On issue of ADC, they should put their house in order. Let them put their house in order. Nigeria is yearning for opposition. And also, INEC should do the needful. May we have free and fair election, transparent election in 2027. That is the key. Otherwise, both opposition and the ruling party, the way we are going, I pray Nigeria will survive that election. God bless you people.
All right. Thank you so much. And God bless you too, all right? I mean, anyway, he said he prays that Nigeria will survive 2027. Let's go back to The Guardian. Worsening cost of living crisis overshadows May Day despite wage increase. Like I said, the TUC, Labour Party, a few political parties, especially the opposition, have decried the poor economy, how it impacts negatively on every single Nigerian and, of course, the pocket of Nigerians. What's your take on this?
Honestly, Nigerians are poorer than what it used to be. Every year, it seems to be people become more poorer. Wages are poor. I mean, cost of living, you know, is getting higher. And it seems that the government has no solution in sight. I mean, look at how much this current president told us some months back that they are making so much money, taxes are up, they've saved so much money from subsidy, we can now pay workers more. That was the promise that this current government gave to the Nigerian people. Oh, we have to, you know, we have to go through the pain so that more money can now go into social services, workers can now be paid. One would expect that by now, wages of an average Nigerian should be something around minimum of about $200. If you convert that to maybe about 300,000 naira, if you want to be fair. Because if you look back, right, to 2014, when the wages was around 30,000, $100 was around maybe 15 to 20,000 naira. And that still covers. But how much is $100 today? $100 is around maybe about 140,000 or so, right? Is there any Nigerian that earns that? Is that our basic minimum wage? So what that means is that Nigerians are even earning about just about $50. Or less than that, about 40.
$40, 40 times.
Yes.
1,000.
So if we're saying 10 years ago, he used to be $150, but today is $40. So what it means is that people are getting more poorer. We're getting politicians are earning much more money. Budget for politicians is being implemented. They increase their own salary at will. Their own budget is being funded. But what do the Nigerian working people? And this is what led to poor, you know, delivery in our civil service. That's the reason why you can't get better services in our government agency, because people are poorly paid. People are begging for money everywhere you go to. Working people. And it's a very dangerous thing for our country. If people, the middle class, who are meant to provide the balance for the people at the lower cadre, if they are struggling,
how much more of
how much more of the people? So,
well, the opposition will disagree with you on that. They will say there seems to be a lot of improvement one way or the other.
There is no improvement. That's what I'm saying. My analysis is that people are poorer now.
Or do you think that there's so much emphasis on infrastructure, rather? I mean, take a look at the front page of The Guardian. FEC approves $2.9 billion real projects for Lagos, Kano, Kaduna.
You see, those projects are a way to steal money. Because why? When they do projects, they overbloat it.
So when do you think this is overbloated?
It is.
2.9 billion.
It is. When the money is being released, go to other African countries. The same project Nigeria is doing. Go and check how much it costs to do the same project. You'll see probably way half of the price. But what we're saying is that, look, we're not saying don't build infrastructure. But there's a human being that would use that infrastructure. When the people are poor, when there's no human capital, there's low investment in human capital, people can survive. Then the infrastructure means nothing. It means nothing. When are we going to get to a point whereby the focus will be on the life of the average Nigerian people, the citizens of your country? I feel that should be the focus. What is the plan for people that are being born every day? People who are in secondary school, people who are the working class. What are the supports for families? Families of husband, wife with 2 children. That is the focus.
I mean, it feels sad that it feels that every workers, the Nigerians in the past few years have felt relatively poorer than they were. It's not some form of celebration. The only thing they're celebrating is the fact that they have a holiday and they don't have to go to work. But let's get a sense of what really Workers' Day celebration is like in different parts of the country. Our correspondent Emmanuel joins us. He'll be bringing us a live live report about workers there and what the situation is. Good morning, Emmanuel.
Very good morning to you too in the studio.
Where are you and what is the Workers' Day celebration? It's looking like there's a lot of pomp and pageantry happening behind you.
As you can see. Oh yes, actually right here at the Unicon Stadium, if you look just around me and behind me, you see workers from various sectors are already converging here in the stadium to celebrate the day. And you know, some of them actually to share their plights, because we know like on a yearly basis or every year, we always hear, you know, the Labour Labour Congress coming in to come and say, oh, we need this improvement, we need this improvement. And looking at the current economy, I know that's been saying the power is down, the economy is not the right, the minimum wage is not actually moving together with what the current state of economy is saying today. But to digress more and also to speak more on this, I have someone who can actually one of the workers here who will be able to share his sight on please come over to be able to share his sight on how he feels about this Workers' Day. Is he truly here to celebrate, or is actually here to just share his grievances and let the government know that things are not really done well and things have to be done properly? Please come up, sir. Yes. Now, first, you're celebrating Workers' Day. Now, what can you say about this? How has this economy actually first affected you? In terms of economy, looking at the minimum wage, not actually, settling with you, not actually, moving together with what the economy is doing. What can you actually say?
Well, Workers' Day is celebrated internationally. It's an annual commemoration of the workers globally, particularly in Nigeria. Today, we are doing it across the federation of the country, and talking about the state of the worker. Though workers are not happy, our leaders are doing their best, but we still plead that they should do more to make the country habitable and to make the system work. An happy worker is a productive worker. We are using this opportunity to plead to our government to listen more and at least for the welfare of the workers so that they can be more productive. If they're happy, everything will go well, but if they are not, insecurity today, kidnapping tomorrow, it's all over the place, and the way they say an idle person is a potential devil's workshop. We are pleading our government to look more into workers' welfareism. Thank you.
Okay, now to you in person now, how has this economy now actually affected you? To you personally, how has this affected you in person? Are you actually okay with the way the government is going or how things are going personally to you? How has this affected you personally?
Well, to me, personally, I wouldn't say I'm okay.
Okay, I think we seem to have a little glitch there. I was enjoying that conversation. Yeah. He's saying for him, he can say it's okay, but then again, he also begs that they should make the country more habitable. Some workers are not happy, but truly, if you're watching us this morning, we have just a few minutes to go and you're a worker. Can you tell us, are you really happy? Because that's a question that can be posed to Nigerians, especially those who work in by the way, those who work in government parastatals recently, especially those in the government, they had their salaries reviewed. And that should be some form of relief and good news for them.
I want us to take some sad news, but very important. Okay. It's on the front page of The Guardian. Boko Haram threatened to execute 416 captives. Now, in the video seen yesterday, a group spokesperson speaking in Hausa announced that all negotiations had collapsed, insisting that there is no more discussion. The terrorists who identified the group as operating under the leadership of Imam Abu Umaima al-Muhajir issued a series of threats directed at the Nigerian authorities while also mocking government efforts and dismissing ransom discussions. We are back here again. We saw the video, some days back where they had given a 72-hour ultimatum to the government. They had asked, they made their demands, but now they're saying all negotiations have collapsed and that now we have 416 Nigerians that are in their hands, that they are threatening to neutralize.
That's 460, somebody's father, somebody's wife, somebody's children, potential solution provider for the future of this country. Citizens of Nigerians who are now faced with dirt in the hands of ragtag group that the government knows where they are. They see them through the satellites, but for some reasons, everybody is playing politics. Governance has now taken a backseat. That's the reason why this is happening. And we just want to call on this government for the remaining days that they still have before they are voted out of power in 2027. They have a responsibility to protect the life of every Nigerian on the soil of this country. The commander-in-chief of the army force is the number one person. He has the power, he has the resources that this country, all of us as citizens, has handed over to him to protect all of us, even the least of us. We should not be facing this kind of thing, where 400 plus Nigerians are now being faced with dirt. And these ragtag insurgents are telling us, making a mockery of a government. It's a shame. And this same government dismisses everything that has to do with insecurity. You heard the president saying that they are using insecurity to threaten him. Somebody needs to remind this president that his responsibility, his first responsibility, is the protection of every Nigerian, wherever they are. Young people, old, everybody. He has a responsibility to rescue these people. And these people must not be killed. They are Nigerians and their life matter. And we will hold him responsible. They must find a way to rescue these people. They know where these terrorists are. Nigeria has enough resources to deal with these insurgents and bring this thing to an end and make sure that Nigerians can live on their own land. They can feed for themselves. We're not asking for too much. We're just asking that let Nigerians be able to live on their land. Let them be able to have their own family. We're running from pillar to post, and it's a disgrace. And if you hear the American government speak yesterday, they are saying that rather than this government face the issue of insecurity headlong, they are busy paying lobbyists, trying to make themselves look good. He's trying to squeeze the opposition. He has a job to do. Few months to the end of this is 4 years. He has a responsibility to protect every Nigerian, and we will hold him responsible. And he must rescue these people.
Well, 416.
416 people.
That's
really
a
sad.
huge number.
There are other stories to look at, but unfortunately, we have run out of time this morning on Breakfast Central. Let's see if I can take any comment on YouTube. YouTube, we saw Mokunye Chukwuemeka says, the day Nigerians unite, it will get better. But the fact that we allow tribalism and people who shouldn't be in power get into office, we will continue like this. The person talking is either an APC member or a tribalistic human. Are you talking of this person, the guest in the studio, or another person?
I don't think he's talking about
okay. Nothing is working. They are not trying. And Pius and Marcos, good morning. Thank you very much. Good morning, Pius. He says, thank you for testing the neck numbers live. And he goes on to say, you know, that he says, I can't see the comment anymore. Yes, he said, meanwhile, yesterday was a day of tension for political parties, but there is still high court for ADCU. Mokunye Chukwuemeka says, was that really a victory for the ADC? Or they should be careful not to celebrate and get another shocker. These are some of the comments that we can take this morning. That's all that we can take this morning on Breakfast Central. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your weekend, you enjoy your May Day, your workers' holiday, and you will be back again same time tomorrow, or Monday rather, at 7 a.m. Breakfast Extra continues over the course of the weekend. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for also
having me.
touching on some of the other stories on the front pages of the newspapers as well.
Thank you. All right, we'll be back on Monday this time around. Benga will be back from, what did you
Where did Benga go to? Okay, we'll tell him to wash the car.
You went to wash the car. He'll be done washing the car. He'll be back on Monday. Take care of yourself and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.